We're back, everyone! Hope you're all doing well, making your way through the long wintered months as best as you can. I've been having a good time in the Twitch streams, hanging out with chat while I work on some of my commissions. If you were there with me for those streams, you're probably already very familiar with the content I'm about to show you. If not, be sure to come follow us and get a behind-the-scenes look at my drawing process. Today, I've got some new Pokemon armors to share with all of you. 4 new designs commissioned by private clients on Instagram based off of 4 different Pokemon. These armors are pretty significant to me as an artist. They mark a turning point for my rendering process and are proof that breaking out of your comfort zone can pay off. As you'll see as I go through each of these designs, I forced myself to work with different brushes and technical methods of painting and color rendering with these, and in my opinion, they got better and better the further I went. I'll try to break down exactly what about my process has changed as I take you through each piece, so sit back and enjoy these 4 new additions to my armor Pokedex. The first piece I was commissioned to do was requested to be based off of a shiny Mega Houndoom. I always love when clients give me specific Pokemon like this. It makes me feel like they have a real emotional connection to one Pokemon in particular. That said, I wanted to do this design justice, and it was with this piece that I first decided I should attempt to try something new with my process. We've talked before about how in the past with my Pokemon armors, I used a modeling app called ArtPose to create a 3D human anatomy reference that I would then proceed to trace over to create my armors. While this technique allowed me to hone my human anatomy skills, the end result was often very similarly shaped and unexciting models that took a lot of personality and energy out of each of the designs. With this Houndoom, I started my sketch from scratch, exaggerating actual human proportions to give it more character and overall more appealing shapes. Another important part of this process was allowing the underdrawing of the body to meld with the actual armor itself. Something important to note about this stage of the drawing was that I was using a different kind of brush for my sketching. This brush tapered in opacity and tip size as I sketched, allowing the underdrawing to be much more gestural. This meant the final lines would have more energy to them overall. I knew right away when I reached the finished ink stage that this was already looking far more exciting than any of my past armors, but I didn't want to stop there. My coloring method changed substantially as well. I started by simply filling in the entire character with a single color, then blocked in the other keytones of the design over that first layer. I went over the whole thing with a multiply layer and added a single flat dark value to indicate shadow. Then I broke out some more painterly brushes and painted in reflective lights, hue shifts, and highlights. Adding some secondary lighting in key places around the design helped give the whole thing a better sense of 3 dimensions. And I was not only thrilled with the way the final product came out, I was eager to do more. The next armor I was commissioned to do would be very different, conceptually, from the first. A client hired me to design this one based off of Corefish, and if you were there for the streams, you'll remember how long it took me to figure out how I was going to pose this character. Usually when I'm asked to do an armor set based off of a first stage Pokemon, I like to make the character a child, small and with significantly different proportions from an adult. But just because this character would be a kid, didn't mean that he couldn't still be badass. The client actually suggested that I use the League of Legends champion Poppy to get some design inspiration for the character, and that was a great jumping off point for the pose and personality that I wanted to capture with this look. The design of the armor itself took inspiration from European knights, actual crawfish, and surprisingly, a rubber raincoat. The latter was suggested by a viewer in chat, but I liked the idea. It made the character feel more like a little kid, and softened some of the hard edges that the spikes on his armor created. It would also be a war crime for me to design a Corefish character and not give it a crab hammer, so I made the weapon look like a giant claw. The color rendering stage of this design worked similarly to Houndoom. I blocked in each keytone, then added a multiply layer for values. You may have noticed in the first design, but I also distinguished the foreground elements of the character, in this case the right arm and hammer, from the background with a thin white stroke that broke the line work and coloring of the character. The most fun part of this painting was at the very end, when I decided to add a little elemental magic to the Corefish's weapon. My newfound painting techniques allowed me to create a very convincing film of water over the end of the crab hammer, and honestly my favorite part of this piece was the little flowing bits of water coming off of the back. The same client who hired me to do the Corefish also commissioned a second piece based off of its evolved form, Crawdad. Crawdad is actually one of my favorite Pokemon, so I wanted to do this design justice. One of my main goals was to make the Corefish and Crawdad characters seem related, or at least look as if they existed in the same world. The little narrative I developed was that the Crawdad character was the mother of the Corefish, and the two worked together to defend their swamp realm. I went back and forth deciding on a pose to build for the character. And if you were there for the stream, you might remember that I actually had a slightly different first sketch that I eventually scrapped for this one. Something interesting about this design is that I've actually already done a Crawdad armor, way back before people were paying me to make these designs. It's not atrocious, but when I look back on it from almost 2 years, I feel like it's very apparent how much my skills as an artist have improved overall. I wanted to make this set a sort of 2.0 version of my original design. While the first iteration of a Crawdad armor I created leaned more into a sci-fi Gundam style, to match this new design to the Corefish set, it needed to be a little bit more fantasy. More like a knight than a mech. The end result kind of met in the middle between the two. I gave it a third arm, and I won't lie to you guys, I really have no idea how that would work practically. Does this character have 3 arms? Does the armor have a mechanical prosthetic that she can somehow control? I don't know. I just thought it looked cool. Once again, the coloring method was more or less the same in this piece as it was with the previous two, but in this one, I spent a little extra time with the atmospheric perspective. Not usually necessary in a piece with no defined background, but something that I thought might add a little bit more depth to the whole piece. As different aspects of the design fell into the background, I added more blue to them. It was subtle here, but it helped me get a grasp on the technique that I could apply with more impactful results later on in my other pieces. The last armor set we'll discuss today is actually one of my favorite pieces I've done so far this year. It feels like a real culmination of every digital rendering technique I've learned and developed over the past few years. It also took me the longest. This time-lapse footage is only a few minutes long, but the whole piece took me well over 15 hours to finish. The client commissioned a Starmie armor set, and the minute I got the message, I was excited. Starmie is about as far away from an anthropomorphic character as a Pokemon can get, and I absolutely love turning Pokemon like that into armors. It's not only a fun challenge, but it leaves so much more room for interesting improvisations. The client did have a few specific requests for individual parts of the armor, but to be honest, we were pretty much on the same page from square one. A singular, crystal eye embedded in a golden mask. Iridescent and reflective metal making up most of the armor. Crystals and gold bands making up the rest. The only thing I wasn't expecting was a sword, which the client specifically requested. Starmie is a special attacker, so I was imagining the character as more of a mage than a knight. The client also requested that this Starmie have long, thick, tendril-like hair. I like including hair in these designs because the shapes do a great job contrasting the sharp lines of the hard armor. Personality-wise, the character was to be stoic, immovable, and unbreakable. I took this characterization a step further by making her facing straight forward. I don't often do this because symmetry is a difficult thing for me to achieve with my drawings, but I ended up copying and pasting a lot, flipping what I sketched on one side over to the other. The beauty of digital art, ladies and gentlemen. In the end, though, I couldn't bring myself to make the entire thing perfectly symmetrical. I gave her a tunic cloth on her right hip. When it came to coloring this one, it took me a minute to get into the groove. More accurately, it took me about an hour and a half. You'll see me start to paint in values and hue shifts, and then completely wipe it all away after a certain point. It was a lot of time down the drain, but it was well worth it. Something seemed to click after that first go, and my take 2 ended up being a lot better. I particularly enjoyed painting in the crystals. It was something that I 100% needed reference for, because gems have such intricate designs that really can't be fudged. Overall, the whole palette was to look very magical, even somewhat unearthly. My narrative for this character was that she came from another planet, seeking to share otherworldly wisdom with worthy foes. I met in the middle between fighter and mage by giving her an arcane glowing sword, which was also a lot of fun to paint. It is with no exaggeration that I say that these 4 pieces are a huge step forward for me as an artist. I hope they helped you guys and taught you some new painting techniques, or at the very least, help you learn how important breaking out of your comfort zone can be. A year ago, I was actually afraid to paint like this. Today, I decided to just go for it, and I couldn't be happier. I hope you all enjoyed this video, and if you liked the designs, be sure to head over to my Redbubble to pick up a sticker or 2. Thanks for watching, guys. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and if you'd like to be there the next time I draw some of these armors, be sure to follow us on Twitch. Enjoy the rest of your days, everyone, and I'll see you all in the next video.